You know what? It's kind of crazy. It feels like Warhammer 3 is closing in real fast now, doesn't it? With how much news is flying off the shelves recently, and it's going to be another busy week here as we get things kicked off with Kislev's unique campaign mechanics. Now, I personally think Kislev should have one of the most difficult playthroughs of any race in Mortal Empires, period, and that's simply a nature of geography. They aren't just on the front lines against the Dark Gods and their invasions from the north, which we know will be a massive problem in Game 3, kinda goes without saying, but they quite literally have Troll Country on their doorstep, which means Throg and Norska are an early game issue for them. They have Throt the Unclean and the Fortress of Hell Pit nearby. They have passes through the World's Edge Mountains directly on their eastern border that are great avenues of attack for Neferata and the Silver Host, and for the Chaos Dwarfs and Uzkalak and the Great Skull Land to come through and cause a ruckus over there. That is an immense amount of pressure being applied at every single step of your playthrough, from turn 1 to turn 200. It really shouldn't let up very much at all. So what I'm hoping is that Creative Assembly doesn't sanitize Kislev's experience just because they're going to be popular, and they certainly will be. There's a good chance Kislev will end up being the second most played faction after Cathay, and hell, they might end up being number 1. Human nations almost always are. They are not a rich nation, they are not a soft nation. It should be a really unique campaign experience and a very difficult one. Now, before we jump into the mechanics themselves, there's some potentially huge news to share in regards to legendary lords in Warhammer 3 and how a specific character may tie into the story arc. Remember, we've talked about the gods of Kislev and how there's a dying deity that will play a core role in the narrative, and my initial impression on who that will be still remains Daz, the god of fire and sun. But Ursun and perhaps a few others are also potential candidates, and I'd say the case for Ursun just got a bit stronger because an old friend just showed up. If you take a look at this image posted to ArtStation and we enhance, there's a character standing next to Castalton that looks an awful lot like Tzar Boris, the father of Ice Queen Katerin, and a character who is presumed dead at this point in the story. The announcement cinematic for Warhammer 3 is in many ways a last will and testament to his daughter, as he narrates in the moments leading up to his death, and in fact, in this very blog post, Creative Assembly makes it clear in no uncertain terms that Kislev is a nation divided, and while it remains resolute against the coming of chaos, the death of the Red Tsar and the rise of his daughter Katerin to the throne has thrown the political landscape into disarray. And yet, I don't think we can so casually ignore the role Tzar Boris might play in Warhammer 3, especially if full concept art of him is leaking to the public. It's definitely possible it's just that, concept art and nothing more. There'll be flashback images in the story, and that's the only reason this art even exists in the first place, that he is still super dead. But I'd say this raises some interesting questions about the dying god, if it's Ursun especially, and perhaps part of the narrative, and one of the major twists in Kislev's story arc will be finding out that Tzar Boris isn't dead, and that he's just in dire need of help. Now, I personally, when this game was first announced, thought Tzar Boris was clearly 100% super dead. After all, that's what happens in the lore. He goes north, he gets ripped apart by a Chaos Horde, he's never seen again. But that would be a crazy twist to throw in there if they decided to keep him alive, and like I said, it raises some interesting questions. Could be a very good reason for Katerin and the Ice Court to invade the Brass Citadel and Khorne's realm and beyond, if they felt they could save their patron deity and faction leader and father all at once. But I think the real question we need to ask ourselves here is, what would Tzar Boris bring to the table as a legendary lord? And my fear is that because of how Kislev has been set up so far, with both Katerin and Castalton and all their generic counterparts and heroes all getting Warhorse and Warbear mounts, that the elements that make Tzar Boris unique are kind of already taken. I mean, we have the Supreme Patriarch of the Grand Orthodoxy, that would have been Tzar Boris' forte before, and they all ride Warbears. Riding Erskine is kind of Tzar Boris' thing, but everyone else is copying him now. Would he bring enough to the table to make an interesting legendary lord? I'm not sure yet. I mean, I think Creative Assembly could probably figure out a way to do so, and I think that the idea of a Tzar Boris campaign, perhaps stuck in the realms of chaos, or at least super far north in the wastes, cut off and surrounded by enemies, sounds pretty damn cool. People have been floating that idea around since the first cinematic trailer dropped. So there's a lot to think about there. It's an interesting reveal that perhaps will have no bearing on Warhammer 3's campaign at all, or it might be the crux of the entire damn thing. By the way, take a quick look at this concept art. I'd really love to see some more bear color and variation by the time this game launches. These look awesome. I mean, polar bears are sweet. I'm cool with them being the upper echelon elites, but some brown bears in tier 4 with different armor and weapon sets from the whites could be a really nice addition. I'm not really sure why CA decided to cut them, honestly. Now, unlike the Tzeentch Mechanics blog, I don't believe anything specific was mentioned regarding the Ice Queen or Castalton having their own unique campaign mechanics on top of what's being covered here. In fact, I'd say the opposite was hinted in this blog, that the Supreme Patriarch can utilize Ice Court mechanics even though he kind of hates them, simply because he's using them as a means to an end. I don't think that's really an issue, as both the religious aspect of Kislev and the Ice Court are represented here anyway, but important for me to clarify that nonetheless. It may not be a situation where Tzeentch, as a faction, has mechanics, but then Kairos has his own stuff that only he can use. I don't think that's happening for Kislev. I think they have their overall campaign mechanics, and they won't have Legendary Lord specific ones. Now, as we've covered in our lore videos previously, Kislev is an intensely religious nation, because the strength of their belief quite literally shields them and empowers the deities entrusted with their protection. This will be represented in-game with devotion, which is earned primarily by ripping Chaos followers inside out by their buttholes, but can also be earned through specific events and religious buildings. So, if a demon stack marches on Prague, and you murder blend them with all your bear cav, then sacrifice the mortal cultists they left behind, you will generate devotion, which can be spent on rituals and invocations to the specific gods of your pantheon. If that devotion begins to dip too low, then Chaos armies will start spawning outside your settlements, and they'll be spurred on by your weakening empire and essentially smelling blood in the water. As expected, the 4 gods Kislev can worship are Salyak, Daz, Ursun, and Tor. Salyak is the Kislevite equivalent of Shalia, goddess of mercy and healing, and she'll increase growth and casualty replenishment faction-wide, both of which are incredibly useful, so I imagine she'll get quite a bit of loving from the player base. I think those are some of the core elements of what you need to upgrade early. Make sure your armies are always on the front lines fighting, making sure that you've got growth for all your cities, so you can move into tier 5 as soon as possible. Daz will increase income from trade and buildings, Ursun will cause attrition to enemy armies and provides a unique army ability, puts a powerful debuff on a target area in battle, and Tor, god of thunder and lightning, gives all armies melee attack and a separate army ability that massively increases damage potential in an AoE, so probably a combat steroid that would, ironically, pair super well with the doom stack of Bear Cav. Get them all in a death ball, throw them in, plop down that buff, and just shred through anything in your way. Now, anytime you unleash one of these rituals, the land itself will rise up to deal with invaders alongside, spreading blizzards across all battle maps in the northern reaches, presumably reducing enemy movement points or causing attrition, and gathering more supporters for your faction as well. Which leads directly into the next mechanic, which ties into invocations for the gods. Supporters, which in many ways are a callback to the internal politicking of Rome II and Attila. Remember, if you didn't handle all that particularly well, you could have some civil wars. Well, that won't happen here, but they're still kind of at each other's throats. Remember, the Ice Court and the Great Orthodoxy are staunchly opposed to one another. There's a lot of infighting there. They aren't at war, but they are both competing for the soul of the nation, and both feel as if they should be the ones to lead Kislev against Chaos into a glorious new age. Presumably, this would not be an issue if Tzar Boris was still around, but with his supposed death, Castalton has, at least from Katarin's perspective anyway, usurped the ideals of the Great Orthodoxy to his own ends, much like Rasputin. So, both ruling parties will attempt to gather followers by undertaking certain missions, completing objectives, conquering enemies, casting religious rituals, and from certain buildings as well. As a faction gains more followers, they'll increase their relationship with the minor factions of Kislev, as well as proving to the people and the troops that they are the rightful ruler. Should the vast majority of Kislevites choose one side or the other, that faction, either the Ice Court or the Grand Orthodoxy, will become dominant, confederate their opponents, and reign supreme. But you can also spend gold or devotion to lower public opinion of the other. Naturally, the Ice Court will bring its own unique benefits if it's in the ascendancy, as will the Great Orthodoxy, and if you prefer the buffs of one or the other, I believe you can let them win even if you're playing the opposite faction. Would be logical in that scenario, though, that it would also hurt your own diplomatic or financial standing if the opposite faction gains full support of the people. Because if you're playing Castalton and you let the Ice Court gain full control of the people, then there should certainly be a debuff associated with that. It'd be kind of weird if all you got was a benefit and you just confederated and there you go, you're having a fun time now. If you're playing one faction and you lose the other, there should definitely be some drawbacks there, but no details as of yet. The next mechanic is tied to the ruling of the nation's three great cities, Kislev itself, Prague, and Arengrad. And these are led by Atamans, which historically were Cossack leaders in the Russian Empire who served as supreme military commanders. In Kislev lore, these Atamans have a good deal of autonomy. They're nobles, essentially, answering only to the Tsarina or the Supreme Patriarch, depending on which faction holds more sway in the region. In-game, they are special lords with unique effects that perform much like the governors from Rome 2, hanging out in the background, gaining traits, and giving you a bit more customization over how you manage or improve a settlement. They do not earn XP like traditional lords, but they will face various dilemmas to increase their skills throughout the course of their career. But you can also draft them into your armies, pulling them away from their role as administrators and plopping them on the front lines in times of need. You get one Ataman per 2 provinces you control, but for the regions of Kislev, Prague, and Arengrad, each are dominated by the cities proper, and I believe are one settlement regions, and it sounds like each will give you control of an Ataman by themselves. So that might be getting reworked from Warhammer 2 to Warhammer 3. I think those are multi-province regions in Game 2. Kislev, of course, is the capital city, where the Royal Palace and the Ice Court reside. Arengrad is the second most important trade hub in the Old World besides Marienburg, and Prague is the Bastion of the North, having felt the fury of the Dark Gods more acutely than perhaps any other city in Warhammer history, a place where Kolek peered over the walls and brought them low with Star Crusher. But I think the coolest campaign mechanic coming with Kislev pertains to the Ice Court, where you recruit Ice Witch Lords and Frost Maiden heroes. These are, of course, powerful mages with important roles in both the governing of the Empire and the military hierarchy of the kingdom, but you cannot just hire them right away. Instead, recruitment will take significantly longer for them than any other character type in the game, as they come of age and undergo their training, but during this process, you can fully customize and specialize each mage, giving them a specific lore of magic, specific traits, abilities, and passive bonuses for your armies. So essentially, you can fully tailor and customize each Ice Witch to the role you most need them to play during that stage of your playthrough, which is exactly the same type of feature I want to see for Demon Princes in Game 3 as well. Having that level of customization and control makes us much more attached to our characters, and lets us pursue specific strategies to a level that we simply haven't been able to in the past. Like, if I need an anti-chaos mage and I need it right now, who's focused solely on combating corruption and beating up demons, I can do that. And now, instead of having to constantly recruit and reroll mages to get them out of the pool in the hopes I get a good trait next time, now I can just build them how I want them from the ground up. That is a much better option than re-rolling over and over until I get knowledgeable or entrepreneur or one of those, frankly, not very interesting traits. Being able to customize like that is a huge deal. It's a really nice change that might lay the groundwork for customizing Demon Princes or Chaos Lords later down the line, which is a feature I've talked about at length a few months back. Honestly, the more features we get like this, the better the trilogy is going to be, because customization and player control can only benefit the campaign. Very excited to hear that. And finally, the Kislev tech tree is focused on 4 distinct areas: the 3 great cities of Kislev, Arengrad, Prague, and the land itself. You will only be able to continue so far into the tech tree until you're stopped if you don't control each city, but once you unlock that city or capture them, you'll unlock a host of upgrades to specific units, income types, and other benefits. We can assume that Kislev will be tied to more overall campaign buffs as the capital, linked to the Ice Court and Grand Orthodoxy, while Arengrad is more focused on trade, economic benefits, and gunpowder, and Prague perhaps more tied to military recruitment and defensive nature of Kislev as the Bastion of the North. But we can see some of the skills already, and the land technologies seem to be linked to improved ice weapons, trade with the dwarfs to increase your armor values, improve firearms with breech loaders, and probably some growth and economic benefits there too. So it doesn't appear like there's anything outwardly broken for Kislev, like we saw with Tzeentch. Nothing hilarious over the top, nothing that will utterly devastate an enemy faction with the click of a button, nothing that will transfer control of one of their most powerful settlements to you or an enemy, but honestly kind of a return to form from historical Total Wars in terms of their campaign mechanics. It feels like Kislev will play very much like a historical faction from Rome 2 or Medieval 2 in a lot of ways, balancing the internal politics and religion of your empire, which hasn't really been a feature in the Warhammer series up to this point. They sound really fun, honestly, and I think that the Ice Court mechanic in particular will be a fantastic blueprint for many races and customization mechanics moving forward. If not for CA to use themselves, then certainly for modders to help us kit out our Chaos Lords, Demon Princes, and characters from other factions later down the line once the modding scene is up and running. And that's an important point to raise, I think, that many of these mechanics will also get retooled and repurposed by modders, which will further extend the life cycle of these games. So, lots to look forward to on that front, and let me know in the comment section below what you all think of Kislev's campaign mechanics so far, and I will see you all in the next video. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.